It's time to listen to BHR with your hosts, Patrick and Paul.
So, Patrick, what is freedom to you? What do you think? What if you had to describe freedom on a personal level? What is it for you?
God, that's a deep question to really ask. I'll try and give a general answer. I mean, it's hard to draw lines, I guess, with freedom.
Right.
But I would say, obviously, just being allowed to, do whatever I want on a day-to-day basis without, government telling me what I need to do or anybody really telling me what I need to do. Just my choice, what I'm going to do with my day-to-day.
Right. So, kind of in essence, you want the freedom to be kind of left alone and to be able to support your family. Mm-hmm. And that's really all you can, that's all that we can all ask for, in a sense, is that freedom to make our own choices to a certain extent and to, be able to go out and do things. But now, what do you think socialism is? There's a lot of talk with the left and socialism and fascism being brought back up. So what do you think socialism really is in today's perspective?
I can't really speak for today's perspective because I don't know what the socialist supporters think it actually is. But the way I understand it is socialism is, the government telling you what to do every day and telling you how you're going to work, telling businesses how they're going to run, telling you what you cannot buy.
Right, and so that's why that's one of my biggest issues with the left's movement nowadays is they criticize the United States and about killing the American dream, and yet on the same hand that they're saying that they're killing the American dream, they're saying that socialism is all right, which in and of itself is a lack of control to kind of choose your own destiny. It's what's best for the community. I mean, instead of you as an individual caring about you and your family, now it's you are working for everyone. You're working for the greater society. And I mean,
in theory, when you put it like that, it sounds like a good thing. It's just a community working, to support each other.
Right.
On the basic level, it sounds good.
Right. I mean, when you keep it inside of the make-believe world, it's amazing. But when you apply it to a large population, it falls apart very fast. Because now, what if I'm your neighbor and I decide I don't want to work? And now, not only are you supporting your family, the society, but you're also supporting me that also doesn't want to do anything.
Well, not directly. I mean,
well, in this case, for the most part, yes. Your income level, right? You're not necessarily generating money for a profit. You're not working for profit anymore. You're working for the betterment of society. And so when you have enough people that accumulate that really don't have any incentive to work, the whole thing falls apart. Because, if you saw me not working and you're like, hey, he's still getting his dividend, his social dividend.
Yeah, why would I work?
Why would you work? Yeah, what's the benefit? Because then you could just spend more time with your family. It's kind of just a really odd, hypocritical thing coming from the left is that they're accusing the right and the conservatives of killing the American dream, yet the large percentage of them want more socialism. And I do understand. I do want to make this point. I do understand the difference between the economic principles of socialism and the more of the social sides of socialism. But it's really just a blatant disregard for individual freedom. I mean, we've talked at length about individualism and just having that concept of it's up to the person to make their own choices and to be judged upon those choices. And really, that is in its essence what capitalism is.
Yes. Well, and you lose that individuality in socialism.
Right. Well, and I'll play devil's advocate in that you do lose individuality in certain aspects of capitalism. That you're just another cog in the wheel of the capitalist machine.
That is true, but you have the option to decide not to be that cog, and it doesn't destroy the whole.
Right. You have the option to go out there and to make your own capitalist machine. You can decide that, hey, I'm going to start up something, I'm going to grow it, and then eventually I'm going to be able to quit my day job and support my family off of this idea that I came up with. And that's the beautiful idea. That's the beautiful thing with capitalism, is that you have that freedom to do that.
Well, and I think a lot of the problem you see with the people in support of capitalism is they just want, stuff for free. They don't want to have to work for
socialism.
it. Sorry, yeah, socialism.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just want things for free. They don't want to have to work for them. They don't want to have to, create their own ideas, because they see what someone else has and they say, why can't I have that? But instead of going out and trying to do something to get there, they're like, no, you just give me some of what you got.
Right. Well, and I want to point out, like, one thing that I learned about there was the whole March on Wall Street movement years ago. Do you remember that?
I do. At the time, I was in support of it until I realized that they had no direction.
Right. Well, and there was a lot of people, and basically what it boiled down to was an anti-capitalist movement. There was a lot of people there that were in support of socialism.
Well, and the reason I was in support of them is not necessarily socialism in general. It was their views on the banking system.
Yeah.
From what I understood, at least in the beginning, they were there to protest against the banks being bailed out again.
Right.
And they need to stop being saved, because obviously they keep destroying the economy every time that they fail.
See, yeah, and I'm in absolute agreement with that idea, because it trends with my concept of economic Darwinism, where only the strongest survive, and if you continue to bail out a failing entity inside of your market, it's gonna cause total chaos.
Yeah, and I think pretty sure it was Iceland. Their banks failed, and they learned about all the corruption, and they started charging people. They didn't bail them out. They fixed the whole system.
But what I was getting at with the whole March on Wall Street is a large percentage of the people that were participating in the March on Wall Street is that they were socialists. And they weren't just like normal socialists. They were trust fund kids that had the ability to go out there and march and protest, and it basically turned into a slight Woodstock.
Yeah, I did see that in some of the videos and stuff, because it was similar to what you see with the social justice movement. I mean, again, cherry picking, but they couldn't get answers out of anyone.
Right.
They didn't get angry. They would just ask people questions, and they just couldn't give direct answers.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very concerning when our generation, or what's the representation from our generation, and their political ideology when it comes to, or I guess their economic ideology when it comes to these things, is that they're being very vocal, and they're going out and standing against capitalism, which was really the tree that gave them the fruit to survive. It's their parents that the kids that have the trust funds, their parents took advantage of capitalism, and they used it to the best of their ability, and they were able to fund a trust fund for their children. I mean, like, the majority of us, the majority of our friends, we're not trust fund kids. I mean, we don't have that idea.
And some of the kids that I do know that came from money, at least around here, they went and got good educations. Mm-hmm. They didn't expect handouts. They were taught how to work, and I think that's a mentality that you don't see with everybody.
Right. Well, and let's just make this a little bit more personal. What's the most amount of hours you've worked in a single pay period, in a 2-week pay period?
I'd say roughly 160.
Yeah, and I mean, that was a lot of hard work, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's
a physical job. It wasn't like I was sitting, on a computer all day.
Right. And that's the type of environment that we grew up in, or not. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can say that we grew up in it.
Yeah, the oil field's been here as long as I've been here. I've been here for 16 years.
Right. But it's that mentality of you work hard for your money, and you do that to support whatever thing that you want as an individual. And that idea does not follow the trend of socialism or the trust fund kids that are out there protesting capitalism. I mean,
you'd still probably work that hard. You just wouldn't see as much from it. You
Right.
wouldn't get as good of a return.
No, yeah, you wouldn't get a return. You would get a dividend supplied by the government. And I just don't see how a group of people that want so many freedoms for individuals and they want the society to benefit, for them to think that more government control in the economy is a good idea. I mean, I'm one where it's like,
We both made it very clear that we want to see less government control, as far as the national government anyway.
yeah. Well, and another thing that they like to point out, or that they seem to criticize, are the big companies, right? I mean, Walmart. We can name them all. You know, Walmart. They probably won't touch Apple because they like their Apple products, but Apple is a huge company.
As far as I know, I think Google surpassed them for a little while. Isn't Apple the biggest corporation in the world right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By far. But at a certain point, these entities that started off as small, they criticize them and they start to become corrupt in their eyes. And I mean, Walmart is a perfect example of something that people criticize. Why? I mean, it bothers me that they don't. They start to separate their love and hate for these people at a certain value. You know.
Well, and we've talked about this ourselves. A lot of people think Walmart's corrupt just because it kills local businesses.
Right. And I mean, I would even argue that it's really the local business's fault. Like, yeah, it's bad when a large company comes in and like they have to the market gets shifted for sure. I mean, the Walmart produces a ton of products for a very low price, and it is hard for small businesses to handle that.
Yeah, they just need to try and adapt, and I think that's where a lot of the blame comes from, is when they try to adapt, is that they don't always succeed.
Right.
So that they feel, because they put their best effort in, they feel like it is Walmart's fault.
Yeah, but, and still, like, with me being more of like that economic Darwinist, it's like, it's up to that person to find the right trend, to find the right market to dive into, to adapt to, and to adjust accordingly. I mean, it's only the fault of the person that's making the calls. And to have something come into your environment, you either adapt or die.
Yeah.
The biggest concern is how much of our generation, outside of our bubble that we live in, really believes in the socialist economic and social policies. Like,
well, and just as we've talked about here, it's hard to find people that are in support of it, because where we are, there are not a lot of liberal views. It's all more on the conservative side, so you're not going to see anybody really supporting socialism around here.
Well, and I feel like a lot of people, even the supporters of it, they don't have quite the understanding that they probably should of what socialism is. I mean, you need to seek that information, and especially when this has been put into practice, like on a mass scale before. Russia, the USSR, is a prime example of socialism at its maximum amount, or for the most part the maximum
socialism amount. Almost always turns into communism.
Well, okay, so like communism is the violent form of socialism.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Is socialism. And when we talked about how socialism, people not working and stuff, and
right.
that's what pushes it towards communism, is because the government has to step in and say you don't have a choice. So
yes and no. So like communism is more like the initiation of, right. So like when you try to separate socialism and communism, think of it as when it's growing, right? A socialist will be a part of the system and try to change it within. Yeah. A communist will try to revolt against it and take any means necessary. So like the actions that we're seeing with the Antifa or any of those political groups where they're starting to become violent, that's more of like a communist trait than anything. But I will say, like, as far as any government that has that much power over the economy and the social policies of the people, it becomes an absolute dictatorship of some form, because you're given so much power to, like, if you were the ultimate leader, or if you had to make the call on in Williston everybody's economic action, or you could make the call on anybody's economic action or their social action, you would become very corrupt. Even as a good person, you will become very corrupt in not too long because of being able to do such things. I mean, it's a human trait. It's sad to say, but when you give any individual so much power or any entity so much power, it becomes very, very, very corrupt. And I find it's such a odd little hypocritical part of the people that are pushing the I guess I'll call the alt-left's agenda of socialism and everything, that, you know, they want these personal freedoms, right? They want the right to choose. They want the right to be pro-abortion. They want the right to do these things, right? And yet at the same hand, they want to give up all of these rights to the government and have them make calls.
I think the people misunderstand that the government, if they can do these things, they're still handing over all that power to the government, and they might not get what they want.
Right.
I think they're thinking in a utopian way that everything's going to work out perfectly for them.
Yeah.
You know, they think that if the government can give me these things, they're going to.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily true. I mean, especially when you look at, like, even dive in a little bit more of the economic side, you know, the idea of even basic necessities. I mean, basic clothing items, right? Mm-hmm. I'll even dive back into the USSR. At its peak efficiency, their economy, for every woman, at its peak efficiency, they could produce 2 bras for every woman a year. And that's the maximum that they could do. So when you think about that, where it's like that their economy wasn't even strong enough to really supply anybody any of the things that they really need. Another socialist / communist government that's still in existence and is relatively close to us is Cuba, which that was in the news not quite a few months ago now, but with Fidel Castro passing away. And I find it baffling that the left, they want a similar type of government, and it's just obviously failed.
I was trying to find a quote that I found on the internet that just kind of goes along with what you were saying, and it was in a socialist government or in a capitalistic government. You know, oh dang it, I'm messing this up. So I was trying to look it up. You know, just trying to think of the right word. Yeah, never mind. I'm not even going to try it because I can't remember how to quote it correctly.
But, well, let's see. So, Cuba, what do you think about, I mean, take a look at Cuba, right? Like,
okay,
what do you know about that country?
Not a lot. I just knew growing up that, you know, Fidel Castro was a dictator, and then, you know, we didn't, after the Cold War, like there was tensions there, the embargo and everything, but that's really just the gist of all I knew.
Right. So, like, I've looked into a little bit of it, and, like, you have people there that once the communist government took over and they really started to put their policies into play, people started starving to death because their government was incapable of supplying basic necessities to the populace. And what happened was, and still is happening, is a grassroots capitalism, a grassroots hidden market that's capitalist in nature, where people started to grow their own food, produce their own products, and they would have to sell it in like a black market type of setting where they would have to remain hidden because they would use alternative governments' currencies. I mean, most likely they would use the American dollar. But it's just another example of socialism at its finest.
Well, and when you put it that way, I always think of North Korea. You know, most of the population starving. You know, there's not a lot of food. More of a dictatorship. You know, definitely the far more intense version of socialism. But
no, that's a perfect example. And these people, they can run away with power. I mean, when you allow the government to have so much control over your day-to-day activities and what you can and cannot do, it doesn't end up being good. I mean, they will take advantage. I mean, yeah, they might be a good person at first or at their core, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, and there's no real way around it.
Well, and that is my fear. Is what if this not social justice movement, but the socialism movement does, take a foothold? What's going to happen? I mean, what is the transition going to be like going from, a capitalistic government to a socialistic government?
Right. Well, and I mean, in a way, I would say that we shouldn't, it's not even a what if scenario. It's something that our generation and the people that kind of align more with our thoughts, they're going to have to fight we're going to have to fight this for the rest of our lives. That this ideology of that we need to support absolutely everyone, and it's that the idea of profit is evil, and that if you don't want to work, it's fine because I'll work for you. We're gonna have to fight this as the years roll by, because there's such a large percentage of our generation that wants this, and they're not open to debate. They're not willing. Many of them are not willing to come to the table and argue economics and why their ideology is somewhat flawed. I mean, this is going to be something that, you will have to deal with, your children will have to deal with the outcomes of this, and it's a very concerning future.
And yeah, I just, with how torn everyone is on everything right now, I'm just very nervous for the future. Because there's people that are uninformed, running around, fighting against things that maybe they might even end up agreeing with.
Right.
But they're just blindly following these groups and starting to form riots and become violent.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I always try to say, if you approach me with a logical argument against something, like with my support of capitalism or with some of my political ideologies, I will try to find a common ground. I will walk to the middle ground, and there's just so many of our generation that they're unwilling to walk to that middle ground. I mean, they might want to find out what you believe, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're willing to compromise with what they believe.
And I think a lot of people are just trying to find out what you believe so they can almost attack you to an extent. Oh, you don't agree with what I agree with, and now I'm going to come after you.
Right. But
you see it with celebrities with, coming out as more, conservative and or if they say the wrong thing, and then you see these social justice people try and just destroy their careers.
Yeah. It's happening all the time now, and it's over and over, and it's amazing to see this unfold, because it's like it's on a fast forward. I think, especially when you can take a look back just like 10 years ago, when we were aware of the world 10 years ago, and now where the world is at, where the differences between what's acceptable to talk about and what's not acceptable to talk about. It's still that same type of ideology of they want to kind of control the narrative. They want control, so then they can kind of hand it over to whoever they see fit. And it's a very, very dangerous play of the socialism side, the communism side. When you look at its essence of with the conservatives and their ideology of free economic system, mm-hmm. You have to, with any free economic system, you're going to have a lot of freedoms. They're not mutually exclusive. There's China that has a communist government, but they have their economy is starting to trend more towards being a free market slightly, which is that's why they've seen a 10% GDP growth over the last few years. But with that free market forming in China, those people are starting to get more freedoms. They're starting to be more capitalist. They're starting to be more conservative in a way.
Aren't they even getting looser on their one-child law?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, I'm not 100% positive on that, but I thought I saw something about that where, they've become more lenient over the years.
Yeah. But where it goes from here is the sun setting on the United States government and our economic belief system. is this the beginning of the real death of the American dream, where you might not have the freedoms to do what you want to do? And furthermore, freedoms of what you want to say.
I think that is, something that we talk about a lot, and that is the biggest concern to me right now, is that's where it seems to be starting. And it's going to take a long time to penetrate, the government and start to change it from that aspect. But right now, you see a lot of people trying to control what you can and cannot say.
Yep.
We'll talk about it a little more one time, but we talked about, Dave Chappelle.
Yep.
I do see kind of a trend with comedians lately, is they're intentionally trying to say, more controversial things, not just because they're funny, but because I think that they're almost trying to just, toe the line.
They're trying to trigger people to a certain level. Yeah.
Because the reason I've noticed it too is because a lot of, these comedians, they do fall more on the left side of things, but they're still, they're going out and saying these things to try and trigger people.
Right. I mean, and it's good that they're doing that, because nothing is above criticism and nothing is above, making fun of it. Give it a little bit of humor. See the truth behind the audience. Let them kind of be exposed to what they actually believe in and have humor in it. It's a very concerning world that we live in as far as what you can and cannot say. I mean, even right now, technically, what our podcast, it could easily be described as hate speech.
Yes.
By the people on the left. It could be just terrible rhetoric that nobody should participate in. But in reality, I still give an open invite to anybody to talk about these things with us.
Yes, and in the future, we plan on having, people on the show that will have, views contradictory to our own.
Yep. And I want to sit down and actually have a debate with somebody that's a socialist, because if they can bring a logical argument of why the United States should adopt more socialist type of policies or economic policies, yeah, I'll go to the middle ground on that. But until then, with the actions that they're taking and how they're becoming more and more militant in censoring free speech and trying to say what you can and cannot do, I mean, really, we need to be more active in putting our message out there, and that's kind of the essence behind our whole thing, our website and this podcast, is to be more active.
Well, and I think one thing, and always talking about the bubble here, is I don't think that what's going on does get enough coverage. I don't think there's a lot of people that do know about these movements that are going on, because I've talked to people about some of the things that we talk about on our podcast, and they kind of just like, well, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, they might not be aware of the Antifa.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of Antifa or safe spaces or the puzzle pieces, things like that. People are not aware about what's going on, and I think that's why this movement's being allowed to grow and become something that we actually have to talk about.
Yeah, and it's something that more and more, like, other people, even our listeners, like, they need to be active in participating in the conversation as well and spreading information that they know about. I mean, participation is the most important thing, because when you, like, little tidbit of history here, when you look back at our revolution, right? Mm-hmm. Our revolution was only really fought, or not necessarily fought, but like it was only really decided on by like 1/3 of the population. I mean, 1/3 of the population was for it, 1/3 of the population was against it, and the other 1/3 didn't care. They just wanted
a place to live.
They were either they didn't care or they were unaware of what was taking place and didn't really have the ability to put their 2 cents in, or they weren't informed.
Well, I think everything we always talk about, even though they are their own separate topics, all of it ties into one thing. Because every time we talk about something, I always kind of think of things that we've talked about before.
Yeah,
and because even with what we were just talking about, totally lost my train of thought. Jesus.
Well, I mean, it's the common trend with everything that we talk about is, in a sense, like the modern day status quo that's going on now, where you cannot talk about certain things. And I mean, Canada just banned any type of criticism of Islam.
That's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody should be banning ideas of any sort.
Or discussing and criticizing ideas.
Because even if those ideas do fall under, legitimate hate speech, the ideas still, you have the right to have those ideas.
Right, and to discuss them, and maybe, if you really are a racist, like, you'll come to an understanding, or if you really are a sexist, you'll come to an understanding. The discussion needs to happen. I mean, they need to allow discussion to happen. And in a sense, like what we do, we are the modern day anti-establishment in a way, because we're talking about the things that people don't want to talk about. We're adding our own opinions in, yes, but we are bringing up and we are criticizing Islam. We're criticizing the left's social ideologies and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and them trying to tell us what we can and cannot say or can and cannot do. I mean, we need to maintain that type of momentum, and I want to bring that momentum to the people listening, where they need to also go out. I mean, yeah, you might not start a podcast, you might not start a website, but go out and initiate a conversation with someone that might not necessarily have the same political ideology as what you do.
And if you're in a bigger area where you see these protests and stuff going on, go and try to talk to people.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a dangerous game to play.
I mean, if you're out there as a Trump supporter, yes, you may be putting yourself in danger.
Well, I mean, even not necessarily as a Trump supporter, but in opposition to what they believe. I mean, you could be a hardcore capitalist, could care less about Donald Trump, but they're still, I mean, you still might bring some heat, and you have to be prepared, physically and mentally for that type of confrontation. But also be prepared to come to some type of understanding of who these people are that are protesting it, that are trying to advocate for the other side. And you try to come to an understanding, but only do that if they're willing to come to an understanding.
Yeah, that's what I would like to encourage, is don't just take our word for everything. Definitely question everything and try and form your own opinions.
Yeah, and take a look at what we're looking at. I mean, I hope you guys are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I also hope you guys do fall in what we believe, but if you don't, let's talk about it.
Yep. Bring the conversation on, guys.